The grand reopening of La Celeste shimmered like a jewel box thrown open to the night. Outside, black cars lined the curb, their doors opening and closing in a steady rhythm as Manhattan's elite stepped onto the crimson runner. Inside, crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across gold-trimmed mirrors and towering arrangements of white orchids. Every surface gleamed, every detail had been polished to the edge of obsession. At the center of the dining room sat Richard Halston, the man everyone was pretending not to watch. Richard did not simply attend events, he altered their outcome. Investors followed his instincts like traders watching market signals. A nod from him could lift a brand into legend. A single dismissive comment could bury it just as quickly. Tonight, his presence signaled validation. The reopening of La Celeste was no longer merely fashionable, it was important. He sat with relaxed composure, dark suit perfectly tailored, silver cufflinks catching the light when he lifted his glass. His expression gave nothing away. The faint lines at the corner of his eyes suggested experience, calculation, patience. He spoke little, listening as the restaurant's new managing partner described imported marble, exclusive wine contracts, and a reimagined culinary direction. Behind the kitchen doors, tension crackled like oil in a hot pan. Executive chef Marcel Dubois moved with precise urgency, inspecting plates as they were assembled. 5 culinary awards decorated his office wall, each a testament to discipline and refinement. He believed in structure, in hierarchy, in control. The reopening was his masterpiece, every flavor calibrated, every garnish deliberate. Timing. He barked softly. Table 7, now. Table 12, hold the sauce until I say. Steam rose in fragrant clouds from copper pans. Butter sizzled. Knives struck cutting boards in rhythmic staccato. The main course, pan-seared sea bass over saffron risotto, finished with citrus beurre blanc, was the crown jewel of the evening. Marcel had tested it dozens of times. But earlier that afternoon, something had gone wrong. A delivery mistake. Fresh tarragon missing. Microgreens wilted. The kitchen thrown into temporary chaos. In the scramble, a quiet suggestion had been made, an alternative blend of herbs, a subtle addition of smoked paprika to deepen the flavor. Marcel had hesitated. Then he had tasted it. And though pride resisted, instinct had recognized something undeniable. Now, as the first plates for the VIP tables were arranged, he felt the tremor of uncertainty he refused to show. The double doors opened. Waitstaff flowed out with synchronized grace. Among them moved Imani Carter, her posture straight, her expression composed. Her uniform was immaculate, though her hands still carried faint warmth from helping plate the risotto moments before. She balanced her tray with quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the room to anticipate need before it was spoken. Most guests barely registered her presence. Richard Halston did not look at her when she set down the sea bass before him. He offered a brief nod of acknowledgement, nothing more. To him, she was part of the machinery of service, the invisible network that sustained evenings like this. Imani stepped back into position, heart pounding harder than she would ever allow to show. From across the room, Marcel watched. Richard lifted his fork. Conversations around him softened instinctively. The managing partner leaned forward slightly, attempting nonchalance. 2 venture capitalists paused mid-sentence. Even the string quartet seemed to ease their tempo. The fork broke through the delicate crust of the sea bass. Steam curled upward. Richard took a bite. For a fraction of a second, nothing changed. Then something did. His eyes sharpened, not widened in surprise, not narrowed in displeasure, but focused. As if a lens had adjusted. He chewed slowly. The citrus opened first, bright but not aggressive. Then came the saffron, warm and luxurious. And beneath it, something unexpected, a whisper of smoke that carried memory rather than heaviness. It wasn't ornamental. It wasn't safe. It was personal. He took another bite, this time gathering risotto and fish together. The flavors unfolded differently now, layered, deliberate yet daring. It was not the cautious brilliance of a chef defending accolades. It was the kind of food that risked being misunderstood because it refused to be ordinary. Richard set his fork down carefully. Silence radiated outward from his table like expanding glass. Marcel felt his pulse in his throat. He wiped his hands on a pristine towel and stepped into the dining room, positioning himself where he could respond immediately. Richard reached for his napkin, dabbing his lips with measured calm. He glanced once at the plate again, then lifted his gaze toward the kitchen. Who made this dish? His voice was not loud, yet it carried cleanly across crystal and conversation. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Marcel stepped forward quickly, offering a smooth smile. I did, Mr. Halston. I personally curated. Richard raised a hand gently, stopping him without hostility. You curated it, he said evenly. But you didn't create it. A hush deeper than before settled over the dining hall. Marcel blinked, caught between offense and confusion. Sir, Richard gestured subtly toward the plate. This isn't the food of someone protecting their legacy. It's the food of someone who's still hungry. The word hung in the air, hungry. Not for food, for something else. Guests exchanged glances. A critic near the back leaned closer, scribbling notes. The managing partner's smile stiffened. Marcel's confidence flickered. He knew what Richard meant. Because earlier that day, when he had tasted the revised version, he had felt it too. A silence stretched. Then, from near the service station, a voice, steady but soft, cut through it. I made it. Heads turned almost in unison. Amani stood with her tray still in hand. Her breathing was controlled, though her pulse thundered in her ears. For a moment, doubt threatened to silence her again. But something in Richard's certainty had given her courage. Marcel's face drained of color. Amani, he warned quietly. She set the tray down carefully. It's true, she said. Chef Dubois tried my version during staff meal. When the herbs didn't arrive today and the timing fell apart, he adjusted the menu. The room seemed suspended between disbelief and revelation. Richard's gaze shifted fully to her for the first time. There was no dismissal in it. Only assessment. You're a waitress, someone whispered from a nearby table. Amani met Richard's eyes directly. I'm also a culinary school graduate, she replied. I just couldn't afford to finish. The vulnerability in the statement did not weaken her. It steadied her. Marcel exhaled slowly, the truth no longer defensible. Richard studied her posture, the absence of apology in her stance, the quiet strength in her tone. He glanced once more at the plate, then back at her. And the smoked paprika? He asked. My grandmother's touch, she said. She believed food should carry memory. For the first time that evening, something like a smile flickered at the corner of Richard Halston's mouth. Around them, the room shifted, not with gossip now, but with recognition that something rare was unfolding. The most powerful man in the room was no longer studying the architecture, the investors, or the wine list. He was studying the waitress. And everyone could feel that the evening had just changed. Richard Halston rose from his chair, the faint creak of leather barely audible over the soft clink of silverware and murmurs of the diners. When Richard moved, people noticed. Something about the way he carried himself commanded attention without demanding it. The restaurant seemed to shrink around him as he walked toward the service station, his gaze fixed on Amani Carter. Each step was deliberate, measured, as though he were weighing his own judgment against something far more subtle than taste alone. Amani's heart thudded in her chest, though she did her best to maintain the composure that had carried her through the chaos of the evening. She'd been trained to move quietly, to anticipate needs, to fade into the background, but none of that mattered now. The room's attention had shifted entirely, and in a single moment, she felt the weight of every pair of eyes upon her. The whispered astonishment from nearby guests, the stunned silence of the city's elite, even Marcel Dubois' own tight-lipped acknowledgement, all converged on her like a tide she could neither stop nor flee. Richard stopped a few feet away, the soft lighting catching the lines of his face and the careful gleam of his cufflinks. He folded his hands in front of him, his voice calm yet resonant as it cut through the gentle hum of the dining room. What's your full name? Amani Carter, sir, she replied, her voice steady even though the tips of her fingers tingled with nervous energy. She kept her gaze level, refusing to let her awe overwhelm her words. Richard's eyes lingered on her for a long moment, the kind of gaze that seemed to measure not just what she had done, but who she was, her resolve, her intellect, the very shape of her ambitions. Ms. Carter, he said, the title formal but respectful, how much would it cost for you to finish your culinary education? The question hit her like a sudden gust. She blinked once, then twice, unsure if she had heard correctly. I think about $20,000, sir, she said cautiously. A murmur spread through the dining room. Guests shifted in their seats, some craning to hear more, others whispering among themselves. It wasn't just that a waitress had created the signature dish that impressed a billionaire, it was that Richard Halston was now personally inquiring about funding her education. A gesture like this, in that very moment, could change the course of her life forever. Richard nodded slowly, absorbing the answer. His gaze softened, but there was an unmistakable weight of seriousness in his tone. And after you finish? He asked. What would you do? Amani took a breath, gathering the courage she had rehearsed countless times in her mind. I want to open a restaurant that blends Southern heritage with modern technique, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. I want people to taste where I come from. To understand the stories behind the food, the history in every spice, every preparation. Richard considered her words carefully, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his lips. A vision like that, he said, requires more than skill. It requires perseverance, and the courage to risk failure. Yes, sir, she answered, her hands clasped in front of her. I'm ready to work for it, every day, no matter the obstacles. For the first time that evening, the entire dining room seemed to hold its collective breath. Richard turned slowly, letting his gaze sweep across the gathered investors, critics, and socialites. He raised his hand slightly, and the room seemed to lean in closer, eager to hear what he would say next. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice commanding attention without raising in volume, I believe we've just witnessed the real reason for tonight's success. A ripple of polite applause started from the nearest tables. It was cautious at first, as though the elite diners were testing the reality of what had just occurred. Then, as comprehension spread, the applause grew more genuine, more enthusiastic. Cameras flashed. Phones were discreetly lifted. Notes were scribbled on pads. Reporters would have a story by morning, a story of a billionaire recognizing talent where few others had. Richard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek silver card, the kind reserved for those who wielded real power. He held it out to Amani. I don't invest in restaurants, he said, his tone measured. I invest in vision. Ms. Carter, you have vision. I will fund your education in full. Once you graduate, bring me your business plan. I will back the rest. Amani felt her chest tighten, the kind of tension that balanced awe and disbelief. She accepted the card with both hands, barely able to form words. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. Say that you're ready to work, Richard replied, the faintest grin on his face. That's all that matters. Marcel Dubois stepped forward, the color returning to his face in a hesitant wave of humility. She deserves it, he said quietly, so only Richard and Amani could hear. She's the most talented cook in my kitchen. I should have said it sooner. Amani's eyes met Marcel's. She nodded slightly, acknowledging his words without arrogance. The respect between them was quiet but genuine. Marcel had overseen her in his kitchen, and now, in this moment, he was admitting publicly that her skill had surpassed even his expectations. Richard's gaze softened. He extended his hand to Amani again. She took it, gripping firmly. Understand this, he said quietly, so only she could hear, tonight is not charity. It is recognition. You earned this. You showed skill, courage, and vision. Never forget that. Amani nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and determination. She had navigated years of obstacles, of quiet dismissal, of financial strain. She had believed in herself when few others did. And now, in front of the city's most powerful, she was being recognized not as a waitress, but as a visionary in the making. Around them, the string quartet resumed its music, a delicate swell of violins and piano filling the air. The diners resumed their meals, but there was a new energy in the room, an electric charge that made every conversation quieter, every glance more attentive. People weren't just eating, they were witnessing a moment of transformation. Cameras flashed again, capturing Amani's face as she held the silver card. Her posture remained proud, poised, unshaken by the attention. She had been invisible to the world for too long, and now, in a single instant, she was at the center of recognition. Richard stepped back, watching her with satisfaction. You'll make me proud, he said, not as a promise, but as a statement of certainty. Amani allowed herself a small, radiant smile, the first of the evening. It was genuine, unguarded. She had dreamed of this moment in fragments, in quiet hopes whispered to herself in the kitchen, but reality had exceeded even her imagination. As the applause in the dining room faded into polite conversation once more, Amani realized something profound. Tonight was not merely about the dish she had prepared. It was about visibility, opportunity, and the courage to step forward when recognition seemed impossible. For years, she had served tables quietly, her talent unnoticed. Now, she stood at the threshold of a future she had dared only to imagine. Richard Halston returned to his table, leaving behind a ripple of admiration and whispers. Guests began to discuss what they had just witnessed, their tones a mixture of astonishment and respect. Marcel Dubois quietly returned to the kitchen, his mind racing with both humility and inspiration. He had discovered a truth tonight: talent could emerge from the most unexpected places. Amani picked up her tray, but this time she carried more than glasses and plates. She carried opportunity, recognition, and the weight of potential finally realized. The room no longer saw her as a background figure. They saw her as the future, someone whose skill, vision, and courage could not be ignored. And in that moment, Amani Carter, once the quiet waitress navigating the margins of the dining room, understood that her story had only just begun. The city, the world, and the future of her culinary dreams awaited, and she would meet them all, unflinching, with the same courage that had brought her to this table tonight. The soft swell of the quartet's music filled the space, mingling with quiet conversation and the hum of admiration, marking the beginning of a chapter that would forever change her life. For Amani, the silver card in her hand was more than a gesture, it was a key. A key to opportunity, to education, to visibility, and to a future that had been waiting for her to claim it. And claim it she would.